Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. That is going to be focusing on Citrix XenApp 6.5 end of life. So we're joined here by Simon Dobbs and then also Adam Matthews, who will be going through the webinar with you.
Hi everyone. So to kick off today, I'll just run through the agenda and the key topics and subjects that we'll be covering today. Obviously, with Citrix XenApp 6.5 going end of life in June 2018, we want to sort of run through what the options are for everybody and talk you through the various different avenues and options that are available to you. So to start off with, we'll talk about what it will look like if you stay on 6.5 and opt to go for the extended support. There's some sort of fairly large support renewal fees involved in that, but we'll go into greater detail on that. The next up, we'll cover up upgrading to 7.x, so the latest versions of Citrix, some of the benefits that you can gain from achieving that, but also just sort of covering off what the actual upgrade path will look like and how best to achieve moving on to the latest versions of Citrix. We'll also discuss migrating to another platform, e.g. looking to utilize cloud platforms, cloud management platforms, utilizing Azure resource locations, AWS resource locations, how best to utilize those different options and the different ways that we can help you to migrate over to those. We'll then dive into a bit more detail on those cloud platform options. So there's a few different ways that you could look to utilize the cloud, extending existing premises out to the cloud, management as a service options, e.g. Citrix Cloud, and we'll also briefly touch on some of the other vendors out there and some of the options available. And then we'll sort of start talking about our full desktop as a service offering as well, just giving you sort of an intro into what that looks like and what the service would look like and things like that. And then finally, we will cover off next steps and some of the ways that we can help you here at Bytes. So sort of talking about our EUC assessment service, what that looks like, the different ways that we can help uncover some of those difficult to understand and difficult to troubleshoot areas of your EUC environment and the best way to move forwards. We can also sort of help with POC and pilots and that sort of stuff, and also perform migration services, kind of regardless of whichever option you sort of decide to go for. We can help you guys out with that. So that's sort of the high level, what the agenda will look like. And with that, I will hand over to Adam Matthews, who's just going to spend a bit of time talking about what extended support means, and then what the upgrade path and process looks like to move to 7.
Thanks, Simon. That's great. So I just want to talk to you guys, first of all, about the extended support for 6.5. Now, there's some huge benefits in moving to 7 in terms of operating system support and new features and just the overall architecture. But it's important, first of all, to understand what you would need to do if you wanted to stay on 6.5. So let me just talk you through that. Now, there's not very many positives in here, so I just want you to understand exactly what the implications are. Now, first of all, you can get extended support on XenApp 6.5 should you choose to continue with that particular platform, but it is extremely expensive. You're looking at around £100,000 every 6 months, renewable every 6 months, to continue that support. And the issues that can go alongside actually doing that are the fact that mainstream support for Server 2008 R2 has already ended. So it's only extended support now that's in place for Server 2008 R2. So Citrix obviously rely on the support for that in order to provide you with the support for XenApp 6.5 moving forward, because that's the only operating system that it's supported on. So there are some serious restrictions in place in terms of keeping that extended support, but it is most definitely possible if you wanted to go down that route. The end of the extended support would be January 2020. So there are another couple of years in place should you want to move forward, but obviously the cost implications involved in that and the technical implications make that kind of prohibitive, really. But yeah, just to make you aware that it is something that is in place to be able to utilize. So moving forward, I would just like to quickly have a chat with you about the actual migration to XenApp 7. Now, there is obviously the technical migration, and then there's also the logistical migration as well, in terms of the actual logistics and the architecture. Now, the big change that has occurred since XenApp 6.5 moving to version 7 is the migration of the IMA, which is the Independent Management Architecture, and ICA in terms of the file types and the connection type, moving over to FMA and HDX. Now, the FMA stands for FlexCast Management Architecture. It's actually not new, it's always been around in Zen Desktop, but what Citrix decided to do was adopt that architecture moving forward and apply it to XenApp 6.5. So how does it differ when you're looking between the two? Well, the main difference comes from how you manage the two products between XenApp and Zen Desktop. You no longer work with zones or zone data collectors. Instead, now the focus is really around sites. Every location can be a site. So let's say, for example, the company headquarters and their respective DR location. We would deploy a site in the headquarters, and then we would have a site in DR, and we'd use Storefront to aggregate the two. And Storefront is the kind of new web interface if you're still on web interface. So in other words, Storefront will be aware of both of the sites, and then it can obviously service the users accordingly and place them where they need to be. Now with FMA, we're also changing the way in which we deploy applications. We now deploy VDAs onto the servers that will be either a virtual desktop or host applications. Now what I love about this is the fact that you can use different versions of Windows with the same VDA. So you can use Server 2012 or Server 2016, and you can also use Windows 10 from the Zen Desktop point of view. Now, obviously, Server 2008 R2 is out of mainstream support, like I said earlier. So the supported operating systems moving forward with version 7 are Server 2012 R2 and Server 2016. The other interesting aspect of FMA is also machine creation services, which allows you to provision large amounts of virtual machines on the fly. There's also Citrix provisioning services, which some obviously consider better or some consider worse, but there's a couple of options that you've got there. But machine creation services is a huge addition in terms of the XenApp 7 architecture. Now, in terms of the actual migration itself, Citrix have made this fairly simple for you. So Citrix have got a bunch of tools called the Smart Tools, and one of those tools is called the Smart Migration Tool. And what the Smart Migration Tool enables you to do is simply go online, add a migration project, put all of your details into that migration project, and then you can actually select the resource location that you want to push it to. So it could be, for example, Citrix Zen Server, or it could be Microsoft Azure in the cloud. It could be pretty much anywhere you like. You install a connection agent, you add the resource location, you put all of your details in, and it literally will go away and migrate your entire platform over to your new XenApp 7 platform. So migrating you fully from IMA all the way over to FMA, and that is pretty much the migration to XenApp 7 today from 6.5. So some of the real key points in there are the fact that Server 2008 R2 is the only OS supported on XenApp 6.5, which is already out of mainstream support, and plus all of the benefits that come around migrating to the FlexCast management architecture over and above those that came from IMA. And finally, the fact that Citrix make it very, very simple for you with the Smart Migration tool. So thank you very much. I will pass you back over to Simon to carry on.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of sort of why staying on 6.5 probably isn't going to be a viable option going forwards, and some of the sort of the key benefits and features in the newer versions of XenApp that will enable you to get the most out of your existing investment and utilize public cloud potentially for new resource locations going forwards. Before we start to sort of go into greater detail around those different options that you can look to use moving forwards with Citrix and other options. I just thought we'd sort of step back a bit and set the scene for some of the key drivers and trends that we're seeing around EUC and the data center in general with a lot of our customers, because it's kind of relevant to what follows and the different ways that you can look to leverage public cloud and your existing on-premise resources to sort of get the most out of them and deliver the end user experience that that your end users expect and that you want to deliver out to them. Because the world today, whilst the sort of the traditional client server world it was pretty easy to service your customers and your end users, the applications that they needed to perform their work and to transact with your company. But as we've sort of moved into a world where organizations and companies are using different clouds, different resource locations, software as a service offerings, locking that down and delivering it out to your end users and maintaining a consistent experience across all of those different locations has become pretty challenging. So as workforces have sort of tended to utilize more devices to consume different applications and access their data and emails, that's great from an end user perspective, allowing them to have the choice to consume and use their applications on various different form factors. But from a sort of IT perspective, it's incredibly challenging trying to keep a hold of the data and securing that data. Windows 10, again, we've seen this be a great opportunity for companies to sort of modernize and move away from kind of a delivery mechanism of to their end users that hasn't really changed since sort of the days of XP in 2003. With the advent of Windows 10 and it slowly sort of gaining traction in the market, we've seen sort of a lot of drivers around how to utilize Windows 10. But again, it presents challenges in the sort of the different ways that you can deliver it, and actually moving some of those sort of more legacy applications and making them right and ready for Windows 10. We're seeing that present some challenges to our customers as well. Again, the accessing from lots of devices, it's a great opportunity to sort of give end users that kind of experience that we're all used to from smartphones and tablets and all that sort of stuff. But creating that consistent experience across those devices is a challenge, and maintaining security whilst trying to open up access to various different form factors is pretty tricky. And then sort of finally, all of these options and different ways of consuming applications and consuming public cloud present some real challenges in maintaining costs, because you've now got OPEX models that you've got to present out to and manage, as well as your kind of existing CapEx costs. So all of these changes represent real opportunities, but they'll also represent challenges to your organization in maintaining costs and not allowing things to spiral too much. In terms of public cloud and migration to the cloud, we've seen sort of several key kind of drivers for our customers. Bytes, we have something like 40% of the UK market share of Azure, so we have a lot of customers who are using and consuming public cloud, and we're definitely seeing an uptake even more across our customer base. But some of those key drivers, obviously Office 365 is a real key one there. I think probably for most of the kind of traditional enterprises, this has been the kind of the key driver to getting up and running and sort of starting to utilize public cloud more and more. There's many benefits associated with Office 365, but it does present some challenges, in maintaining that end user experience, particularly in VDI and XenApp environments. The need to cache exchange and things like that. Office 365 and VDI environments can present a bit of a challenge. There's some things we can do around that to help maintain that experience and keep it, performance for your end users. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of people more and more now start to look at how they can move workloads to the cloud. So, certain applications that are a good fit that can utilize some of those cloud native services. We're certainly seeing some of our customers start to move things and migrate stuff over to the cloud. Another driver we're seeing is the sort of the desire to create sort of an easier way of managing their applications and their resources. in some circumstances, the kind of the traditional way of delivering out IT means that you have to be, a hardware specialist, then a virtualization specialist, then an application specialist, and security specialist, firewall specialist. There's a lot of different areas that you need to be an expert on. And part of the desire of utilizing public cloud that we've seen is that desire to get away from having to have so many specializations across the stack by sort of almost allowing kind of the public cloud providers to give you that base platform. It then allows you to build on top of that. Most of those specializations still need to exist, but it just takes away that kind of additional layer of complexity and allows you to focus on delivering out services and applications more efficiently. And then obviously a big one is also the ability to scale out and kind of effectively limitless resources, which is, when compared to a sort of traditional on-premise data center, is a big driver and really helps to sort of take away performance and capacity constraints. And then finally, Windows 10, as we've seen, as customers start to consume Windows 10 and Office 365, it then sort of breaks down some of those barriers in utilizing public cloud for their services and drives more and more public cloud consumption. So that's sort of some of the stuff that we've seen with our customers and some of the key drivers that we've seen and some of the ways that they're starting to migrate to the cloud. But taking it back now to sort of focusing on Citrix 6.5, XenApp, and other sort of VDI and virtualized application options. If and when you've sort of migrated over to Citrix 7, this is kind of probably the easiest and quickest way that you can get up and running and utilizing Azure for your Citrix environment. But there's kind of two options here. The first one is to extend out your existing on-premise deployment. So you can continue having all of the infrastructure based in your data center, but then if you say have a requirement for contractors to connect in or sort of temporary workers, seasonal workers, that sort of thing, if you don't have the capacity on premise, you could then look to just extend out that Citrix environment into Azure, and then you've kind of got that limitless resources there and ready to go to spin up all the desktops and virtualized apps that you need. So this can be up and running in a fairly quick and efficient manner because you are using your on-premise architecture, but just extending it out into Azure. If you're kind of looking to get away from having a lot of that architecture on-premise, the next one you could do is you could kind of look to lift and shift your Citrix environment up into Azure. By which I mean you can put all of the architecture running on infrastructure as a service, so the back-end Citrix infrastructure, and then kind of in the same way as the extend option, you can also look to host your virtual applications and desktops in Azure. This can be quite a good way, again, if you've got capacity constraints on premise or you're starting to use Azure more and more, this can be quite a good way to move things up there in a fairly efficient manner. The only thing you will need to do is go through and build out the infrastructure as a service for your architecture and then spin that up, deploy Citrix into there, and then spin out and build up your RDS hosts and virtual desktops. The next option that we have, and we're seeing sort of a lot of focus from Citrix and Microsoft on utilizing this service, and a number of other vendors are moving into this space as well. So VMware are releasing their offerings around this, and we're also working with some new vendors like Workspot who are able to deliver out this control plane as a service. Essentially what this means is it's kind of like the hosting option, but the difference here is that the vendor is hosting the back-end infrastructure and architecture. So they will build and manage all of the management tools that you need to deliver out virtualized applications and desktops, which means that all you then need to do is build up your virtualized applications and your virtualized desktops, and then you can then roll them out wherever you want them to be. So it's kind of like consuming Citrix or VMware or Workspot as in a kind of software as a service model, which again can then change it from a CapEx to an OpEx model, which can be helpful depending on the way your organizations work. But it will also help IT to get away from that need to patch and maintain and troubleshoot back-end infrastructure, because that's all being managed by someone else. It can also help to get away from this kind of the topic of today's, moving away from 6.5 by utilizing the control plane. It will always be evergreen. It will always be maintained by the vendor, which means that you no longer have to need to worry about these forklift upgrades where you kind of need to almost start from scratch again to get off of the aging and going end of life platform. And then it also helps you to move away from that kind of build, maintain, renew, upgrade, and repeat process that we've all been going through for so long. You can forget about that process because it's being managed by the vendor, allowing you to focus on delivering out your applications and desktops to your users and sort of giving them the service that they need and want to consume. And then the final option that we have, which we offer here at Bytes, is cloud native desktop as a service. So this is all hosted out of Azure. And if you kind of feel that you would like to remove the management of the whole sort of desktop or virtualized application environment, then we can work with you to do that. So that would mean helping you to design, size, build the desktops and the application environment. Will then help you to deliver that environment, and we will then manage it going forwards for you. So if that sounds like something that could be of interest to you, then we can absolutely help with it. I guess the real kind of key here is that the management of that environment is completely taken away from you guys. It's no longer kind of a hassle for you guys. Again, you can go and focus on other things. You know, we can patch and maintain it and keep it secure and things like that. This is all hosted out of Azure. So again, it's a kind of a good way to get sort of some of that on-premise infrastructure that you may not be too sure what to do with, get it up into Azure. This would be hosted out of our secure Azure environment, but we can pair it into your environment and make sure it has access to the file shares and the applications that it needs to. So that's kind of some of the options. Once you've gone from that 6.5 environment and sort of upgraded it, or if you're looking to move away from that 6.5 environment in general and start to consume other technologies, there's a few different options there that most of the key players out there are able to offer. But to kind of get to that point, we'd be really keen to work with everybody to help them understand what they're doing today, and then help them to go forwards and decide on the best approach for them going forwards. So we kind of have this approach that we've developed when working with our customers, to try and first of all understand exactly what they're doing. So go through this kind of discovery process to understand what the organization looks like, where it's based, number of offices, and also obviously pretty importantly, what the business strategy is. Where's the focus on growth? How's the company and the organization going to grow going forwards? What are its key strategies? What is its key approach? How does it want to consume IT services going forwards? We'll then also work with you to understand the business controls in place, because obviously moving to public cloud is generally a big change for organizations from how they used to work. So it's important for us to understand what's going on there. And also, we also want to understand what you have in place today, the investments that you have today, because there's no point in, if you just made good investments, there's no point in moving away from that if it doesn't make sense for the organization. So we go through all of that in the discovery process to understand what's going on today, the key applications, is the performance good? Do people get a good experience out of what's happening today? Does everybody within IT, are you able to understand what's going on? Or are you kind of a company that's often acquiring new companies and gaining new applications all the time, making it difficult to actually get a handle on, those applications that are out there, how they work, do they work, who's actually accessing them, and all that sort of stuff. And if those kind of areas you're struggling to get a handle on, then we can go through an assessment process with you that'll help you to understand some of those key areas. So things like, what is normal behavior in the environment today? Does normal meet required service levels, and is it enabling users to be productive? We can report back on user productivity and kind of attach some scores to So how productive users are, and then benchmark that, and then work with you to improve that productivity, enabling you to show to the business that there's been clear productivity gained by any sort of kind of new IT spend approach or migration. And then we can sort of also help you to understand the applications that there are in the environment, where they're working, how often they're being consumed, what the performance is like. If the performance is good, then obviously that's great. But if the performance is bad, it can be tricky to actually understand exactly where the problems are coming from. So we can work through in the assessment process where the latency may be occurring in the application stack and things like that, to really drill down into it and understand what's going on. So once we've sort of gone through that discovery and assessment process, we'll have a pretty good understanding of everything that's going on, the key drivers for the business, how things are working today, and then by combining the two of those, we can work with you to then start to identify and define the strategy for you guys going forwards for your end user computing approach. And then after that, we can then sort of move into that envision side of things. So envisioning kind of designing the platform, what it should look like, the best way to consume your resources, the best way to deliver out applications to your users, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's all about end users consuming applications in the most efficient way possible. So in that envisionizing stage, that's what our focus is on, and using the data from the discovery and assessment process, we can get to that point. We'll then work with you to go through the modernization stage. So in the modernization stage, that would be helping you to migrate, deploy, and update your existing platforms, or moving to new platforms, whatever the case may be, whatever might make sense for your organization. And then after that, we can move into that management phase, where we'll continue to help you manage the environment, if it's something that you guys don't have time to do, or if it's a new environment and you want some time to get familiarized with the new platform, and then we can work with you in that phase as well. So kind of the key of this and the whole approach is to work with you from start to finish, to make sure that everything is delivered and works in a performant fashion. And so to sum up, just to kind of reiterate my point at the end there, there's a lot that we can do with you. The EUC assessment that I was just discussing is a free assessment, so we can work with you and help you get to the point that you need to be, and it's all free of charge, which is always good. So we can work with you both from the Citrix and the VMware and the Workspot side of things, but we're also, Azure specialists as well. As I said earlier, we have something like 40% market share of Azure consumption in the UK. All that really means is that we're talking about this day in, day out, working with our customers to understand how best to consume Azure, how best to manage Azure once you're up there, how to get the most out of it, how to make cost savings, how to utilize existing licenses in Azure to make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck once you're up there or before you migrate. We also work a lot with AWS, so if that's sort of your cloud platform of choice, we do a lot of work with those guys and can perform similar services across AWS as well. So we can work with you, when you're sort of going through this upgrade and potentially migration process, we can work with you to kind of identify whether Azure or AWS might make most sense for your workloads. So to sum up, pretty much, whatever you need in this process, we can work with you to understand, what it is and what needs to happen. Just get in touch and we can go from there. So that's kind of all of the slides that we had to run through today. If anyone has any questions, just please submit them via the questions panel on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you want to submit your questions now, that's absolutely fine. If you'd rather do it outside of the webinar, then please just email our virtualization team, which is, you can see the email address on screen now, but it's vteam@bytes.co.uk, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you for your time. Okay, so the first question we have is, if we stay with 6.5, is the support renewal mandatory? Yes, is unfortunately the answer to that. The 100,000 every 6 months is mandatory on top of your renewal. So basically, the driver from Citrix is to get everybody off of 6.5. So unfortunately, that is, yeah, a mandatory cost, I'm afraid. The next question we have is, if you extend, how do you handle profiles and data? Which is a really good question. That is something that we need to work with each organization on a kind of case-by-case basis to understand how you guys work today, how you handle your roaming profiles or whatever your profile management set looks like. Generally speaking, though, with profiles, we'd always recommend spinning up some file sharing resources into that location to keep that nice and performant. That's generally the way that we'd recommend to go, but again, we can work with that on a kind of case-by-case basis. The next question we have, which is around, again, asking some questions around the rather large extended support fee. The question is that cost dependent on how many licenses we hold, or is it a flat rate? The answer is, unfortunately, it's a flat rate. So it doesn't really matter. It's regardless of how many licenses you currently hold. It's per organization ID that Citrix hold for you. So if you have one organization ID, that will be 100K for every 6 months. Next question we have is, we are planning to move to XenApp 7. However, we will not hit the deadline for 6.5 going end of life. If we do not want to log support calls for 6.5, do we still have to buy extended support? Which is a really good question. I think there's maybe some things that we can do here, but I'd like to take it off of line, because I'm not quite sure what would happen if you let it slip and then try to renew, exactly what that process would look like. So we'll take that as a takeaway and get back to you and sort of confirm exactly what the process would look like and how best we can tackle that. Next question we have is, how does Azure compare to AWS for Citrix environments? Microsoft and Citrix have a very strong partnership. They've been working a lot together over the last couple of years, really, but particularly the last 18 months. So they see the two of them as a very natural fit for this process, and most of the development that Citrix are doing has been put into Azure. So that's probably the strongest public cloud choice for Citrix currently at the moment. But that said, it does work in AWS. You can use a lot of the sort of smart deploy tools that Citrix have to utilize AWS as well. So I'd say probably Azure is kind of the front runner in terms of utilizing Citrix in public cloud, but it has a strong play in AWS as well. My kind of gut feel for this one is that it kind of boils down to where your public cloud strategy lies. If you're going to sort of be using Azure, generally speaking, as your public cloud of choice, then it probably makes sense to focus on that first. If AWS, then vice versa. Next question we have is, our current Citrix support expires December 2018. Will we have to pay additional support costs from June? The short answer is yes, I'm afraid so. Yeah, the whole, and full year as well. The whole driver from Citrix is to try and get people off of 6.5, I'm afraid. Next question we have is, if we stayed on 6.5, would we have to pay for the renewal of the licenses along with 100K every 6 months? Again, yes, I'm afraid the answer is yes. Yeah, they really do want to get people off of 6.5, I'm afraid. So if that's something you want some help with in figuring out what that migration process should look like, just to get it done as quickly as possible, or whatever the case may be, do let us know, and we can help you to start planning that. Whatever the long-term strategy is, or if you just need a short-term approach to get off of it, we can kind of help with that.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Looks like that's all the questions that we have on today's webinar. So thank you everyone for joining and taking the time out of your day to join the webinar. And also thank you, Simon, and thank you, Adam, as well, for presenting. So as mentioned at the beginning, if you would like any further information, or if you're interested in the assessment or just like a callback, pop that in the feedback form and one of our specialists will be in touch with you. And I'll also send you a link to the recording as well if you'd like to kind of share it around your organisation. That's completely fine. I'll send that over tomorrow. Okay, so thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.